The snow made Greyhaven House look peaceful, but everyone in Hollow Creek knew to stay away. Caleb Rowan bought it because a betrayed Navy SEAL with little left does not get to be picky. He wanted silence, an old roof, and one loyal German shepherd beside him. But on the first cold night, Bishop stopped in the kitchen and listened to something beneath the floor. 3 faint knocks rose from the darkness below. What Caleb found under that house was not a ghost, but a woman the town had tried to erase. Stay with this story, and if it moves you, please like, subscribe, and help this channel reach 1,000 subscribers so more stories like this can be told. The morning Caleb Rowan left the city, winter looked almost innocent. Sunlight struck the glass towers and salted streets with a clean, silver brightness, the kind that made everything seem washed and forgiven. The snow piled along the sidewalks glittered as if the world had dressed itself for a ceremony. Caleb knew better. Some mornings did not bless a man. Some mornings only made the wreckage easier to see. His old pickup waited at the curb with its engine trembling faintly in the cold. In the bed were 2 duffel bags, a toolbox, a rolled sleeping bag, a plastic crate of canned food, and the last pieces of a life that had once taken up an entire house. Beside the passenger door stood Bishop. The German shepherd watched the street with solemn amber eyes, his black and gold coat ruffling in the bitter wind. His back carried a dark saddle of fur, broad and strong, while the gold along his chest and legs caught the winter light like old honey. One edge of his right ear bore a small scar, a missing notch that gave him a permanently thoughtful look, as if he had once argued with fate and taken a souvenir. "Yeah," Caleb muttered, opening the door for him. "I know, not exactly a parade." Bishop climbed in without enthusiasm and settled on the seat, harness creaking softly. He looked straight ahead, refusing to waste judgment on the obvious. Caleb almost smiled. Almost. At 52, Caleb still carried himself like a man who had been trained to make no unnecessary movement. He stood a little over 6 feet, lean but strong through the shoulders, his body hardened not by vanity, but by use. His jaw was square, clean-shaven, and too tightly held. His dark hair, cut in a neat undercut, showed silver at both temples. The gray had come early, then stayed like frost on a roof that never fully thawed. He wore the olive-drab combat shirt he had kept after leaving the teams, close-fitting through the torso. Camouflage sleeves faded by years of weather and washing, dark horizontal bands circling the upper arms. The shirt was no costume. Caleb had removed every patch that once told the world who he had been. Still, the fabric remembered. So did his posture. So did the old military watch with the scratched face and frayed olive strap on his wrist. Behind him, on the 10th floor of a building with polished stone floors and silent elevators, lawyers were still turning pain into paragraphs. The divorce papers called it a civil settlement. Caleb had read that phrase twice. Civil. As if betrayal became polite when stamped and filed. His wife had not simply fallen in love with another man. That would have hurt, but pain alone was honest. No, she had prepared. Quietly. Efficiently. While Caleb was still trying to understand why her laugh had changed, why she no longer met his eyes over coffee, she had been moving assets through business accounts, shifting ownership, letting attorneys build walls around money he had thought belonged to both of them. By the time Caleb saw the trap, the jaws were already closed. His own lawyer, Martin Kell, had told him he could fight. Martin was old, sharp, and tired in the way decent lawyers became when they had spent too many years watching people weaponize love. "You have grounds," Martin had said. "You also have the stomach for another 12 months of this?" Caleb had looked at the folder on the table. Bank statements, transfers, emails, affidavits, words for wounds. No, he had answered. So he took the truck, a few tools, a thin remainder of cash. Bishop. The house he had repaired with his own hands was gone. The kitchen where his wife once danced barefoot while rain hit the windows was gone. The porch he had rebuilt one summer after coming home from deployment was gone. Or worse, it still existed, but no longer belonged to the memory he had built around it. That was the strange cruelty of betrayal. It did not only steal the future, it reached backward with dirty fingers and touched every beautiful thing. Caleb got into the truck and closed the door. Bishop turned his head and looked at him. "What?" Caleb said. The dog blinked once. "Right. Drive first. Fall apart later." The engine groaned, then caught. Caleb pulled away from the curb and did not look up at the apartment windows. Some battles deserved no final salute. He drove north. The city thinned into suburbs, the suburbs into dark pines and frozen fields. Maine opened before him in long white stretches, quiet and severe. The farther he drove, the more the road seemed to erase him. Mile by mile, he became less husband, less homeowner, less man named in legal documents, and more simply a figure behind a windshield with a dog beside him and snow ahead. By late afternoon, he reached Hollow Creek. The town sat in a shallow valley between pine-covered ridges and a frozen lake that shone under the weak sun like hammered pewter. Smoke rose from chimneys. A small bakery glowed at the corner of Main Street, its windows fogged from heat, the air around it sweet with cinnamon and yeast. Wooden houses climbed the slopes above town, their roofs buried under clean snow, their windows warm and golden. It should have looked welcoming. To Caleb, it looked like a place that had learned how to keep secrets warmly. He rented a room at a roadside motel beside a gas station. The sign outside flickered between Hollow Creek Motor Lodge and Hollow Creek Motor Lodge, as if even the word lodge had given up halfway through winter. The room smelled of old carpet, pine cleaner, and a heater fighting with heroic futility. Caleb set his bags near the bed. Bishop inspected the room with grave professionalism. Door, window, bathroom, heater, bedspread, suspicious corner behind the chair. Finding no immediate enemy except the carpet pattern, he circled twice and lay down, facing the door. "You're adjusting well," Caleb said. Bishop sighed. In the days that followed, Caleb worked because work was simpler than memory. He shoveled snow from storefronts before sunrise. He split wood behind a feed supply shop until his palms stung through his gloves. He repaired a sagging fence for a widow who paid him in cash and a jar of pickled beans. At the hardware store, he unloaded bags of salt and stacks of plywood, while the owner, a broad man named Frank Teague, pretended not to study him. People in Hollow Creek were polite. Not warm exactly. Polite in the northern way where kindness wore a coat of caution. They nodded. They said, "Cold one." They asked if Bishop was friendly from a safe distance. Bishop usually answered by sitting down and staring at them until they rethought the question. At night, Caleb returned to the motel with sore shoulders and wet boots. He ate canned chili heated in a dented pot, cleaned his tools, and sat on the edge of the bed while the television murmured without being watched. Sometimes his hand drifted toward the place where a weapon would have been, old instincts rising from dreams he had not invited. Every time, Bishop noticed, the dog would rise silently, cross the room, and place his muzzle on Caleb's wrist. Not dramatic, not needy, just there. "Stay," the old leather collar seemed to say. The word was carved on its inside, hidden unless someone looked closely. Stay. Caleb would breathe until the room returned, until the motel heater became a heater again and not distant machinery, until snow against the window became snow and not static. Bishop never hurried him. That was the gift animals had over people. They did not demand a man explain his ruins before sitting beside him in them. One morning, Frank at the hardware store mentioned a house. "Place out by North Ridge Road," he said, sliding Caleb a receipt. "Needs work. Cheap." "How cheap?" Frank named a number so low, Caleb thought he had misheard. "That's not a price," Caleb said. "That's a warning label." Frank looked toward the front windows, where snow blew in bright sheets across the street. "Some folks say things." "Folks usually do. This place earns it." That was how Caleb first heard of Greyhaven House. Rita Sloan showed it to him 2 days later. She was a local real estate agent in a camel wool coat that had seen too many winters and not enough good news. Around 50, with dark blonde hair cut to her shoulders and careful hazel eyes, Rita carried a leather folder against her chest as if the papers inside might try to escape and confess something. Greyhaven sat at the edge of a pine wood where the road narrowed and the town seemed to hold back. The house was 2 stories, old but not collapsed, with white siding gone gray from weather and a porch that leaned slightly, like a tired man listening through a door. Snow lay thick on the roof. Icicles hung along the eaves. Behind it, the forest rose dark and still. Bishop stepped from the truck and stopped. Caleb noticed. "You feel that too?" he murmured. The dog did not move. Rita pretended not to see. Inside, the house smelled of cold wood, dust, and closed rooms. The floors creaked, but not fatally. The roof had a leak near the back bedroom, patched badly, but patchable. The kitchen cabinets sagged. The furnace would need prayer, parts, and possibly negotiation with ancient gods. Still, Caleb saw bones, good beams, a stone foundation, a well out back, land enough for Bishop to run. "Why so low?" he asked. Rita adjusted her gloves. "Distance from town, deferred maintenance." Prior buyers withdrew. "And the part you don't put in the listing?" Her mouth tightened. Caleb waited. Rita looked toward the kitchen, then away. "People say it's haunted." Bishop gave a soft huff through his nose. Caleb glanced at him. "He's skeptical." Rita did not laugh. "At night there are sounds, knocking under the floor. Some say the previous owner vanished. Some say they saw a woman at the window after the house was empty." She opened her folder too quickly. "None of that is legal disclosure, just town nonsense." "Is it?" She met his eyes then, and for a second Caleb saw not deception, but fear worn thin by habit. "I honestly don't know what it is." He did not buy the house that day. He came back twice, checked the tax records, walked the property line. Crawled under the porch with a flashlight, tested the well pump, called Martin Kell, and asked him to look over the documents. Martin grumbled about old houses, cheap deeds, and men who mistook isolation for recovery, but he found no obvious legal trap. "Caleb," Martin said on the phone, "are you buying this place because it's a good idea or because it's the last idea?" Caleb stood in the Greyhaven yard while Bishop sniffed the dead grass poking through the snow. "Does it matter?" "It usually does." Caleb looked at the house, gray, wounded, still standing. Not this time. The closing was quiet. Rita handed him the keys in her small office above a pharmacy, the windows rattling softly in the wind. She looked relieved and ashamed in equal measure. "I hope it gives you what you need," she said. Caleb took the keys. "I just need it to keep the snow off." Rita's eyes flickered. "Sometimes houses do more than that." He did not ask what she meant. By the time Caleb moved in, the afternoon was bright with falling snow. Not a storm, not yet. Just soft flakes drifting through sunlight, turning the pines behind Greyhaven into dark pillars in a white cathedral. He carried in the duffel bags, the toolbox, the crate of canned food. Bishop supervised from the porch, occasionally looking offended by Caleb's lifting technique. Inside, Caleb started a fire in the old stone hearth. Smoke hesitated, then found the chimney. The first flames took slowly, licking at dry kindling until the room warmed by degrees. It was not home, not yet, maybe not ever, but it was shelter. Caleb stood in the living room with his hands on his hips, listening to the house settle around him. "Well," he said to Bishop, "we've lived in worse." Bishop looked at him. "Don't make that face. We have." The dog turned and walked into the kitchen. Caleb followed a moment later, expecting him to be searching for dropped food or judging the cabinets. But Bishop stood perfectly still in the middle of the room. His ears were up. His body had gone rigid. His amber eyes were fixed on an old rug near the far corner, half tucked under a small breakfast table left by some previous owner. Caleb's humor faded. "What is it?" Bishop did not bark. He did not growl. That troubled Caleb more. The dog simply stared at the floor as if listening to something buried beneath the boards. The house creaked. The fire popped in the next room. Outside, snow brushed softly against the windows. Then, from somewhere below the kitchen floor, came 3 faint knocks, not loud, not frantic, just 3 careful sounds rising through the old wood. Caleb stood very still. Bishop lowered his head, ears forward, every inch of him awake. The house, which had seemed abandoned only moments before, suddenly felt as if it had been holding its breath for years. And now, at last, someone underneath had answered. For the first few seconds after the knocks, Caleb Rowan did nothing. That was not fear. Fear had a taste and a temperature. He knew it too well. Fear made the mouth metallic, sharpened the edges of the room, turned every shadow into a possible hand. This was different. This was the cold, disciplined stillness that came before choosing whether a thing was real. Greyhaven House creaked around him. The old fire popped once in the living room. Snow brushed the kitchen windows with soft, harmless fingers. Somewhere in the walls, a pipe gave a tired click. Then came the sound again. 3 knocks, a pause, 2 knocks, a pause, 1 long scrape from beneath the boards. Bishop did not bark. That troubled Caleb more than noise would have. The German shepherd stood in the center of the kitchen, head low, ears forward, black and gold body locked into attention. Not hunting, not warning against an animal. Listening. "Could be plumbing," Caleb said. Bishop did not turn his head. Old house. Bad pipes. Maybe raccoon with a dramatic sense of timing. The dog's right ear, the one with the small notch in it, twitched once. Caleb exhaled through his nose. Fine, not plumbing. He went to the truck for the larger flashlight, a pry bar, and his gloves. The whole time, he kept expecting the sensible explanation to arrive. A loose duct, a crawl space, a branch under the foundation, a raccoon, ideally one with shame, and a willingness to relocate. But when he returned to the kitchen, Bishop had not moved. The faded rug in the corner looked harmless enough. Blue-gray, threadbare, stiff with years of dust. Caleb dragged the breakfast table aside, its legs screeching across the floor, then peeled the rug back. Beneath it, the boards were not quite like the rest of the kitchen. The outline was subtle, almost hidden under old varnish and grime, a square seam cut into the floor, 4 feet by 4 feet. Along one side, Caleb found a recessed iron ring painted over so many times it looked like a knot in the wood. "Somebody didn't want this opened often," he murmured. Bishop lowered his nose and sniffed near the seam. His hackles rose, but only slightly. Caleb knew the difference. This was not the dog sensing a threat about to leap out. This was recognition. Caleb wedged the pry bar under the ring and cracked the old paint. The sound was small, but in the empty kitchen it carried like a bone breaking. He pulled. At first, nothing moved. He braced one boot against the floor and pulled harder. The door gave with a wet wooden groan, lifting just enough for a breath of darkness to rise from below. Cold air rolled out, not ordinary basement cold. This was deeper, older, carrying the smell of damp soil, rusted metal, old wood, and something human underneath it all. Sweat, fear, sickness, survival. Bishop made a low sound in his throat. "Stay close," Caleb said. He lifted the hatch fully. A narrow stairway descended into blackness beneath the kitchen. The steps were rough wood, damp at the edges, but not rotten through. Caleb aimed the flashlight downward. The beam caught stone walls, pipes, shelves, the curve of a low tunnel opening at the far side. A storm cellar. No, more than that. An old shelter. He moved down 1 step at a time. Bishop came behind him, careful and silent, his claws clicking softly against the wood. Caleb's body remembered rooms like this. Tight entries, low light, corners that did not reveal themselves. Air that seemed to hold its breath. At the bottom, he swept the flashlight across the space. Shelves lined one wall, mostly empty except for jars gray with dust and a rusted lantern. A collapsed cot lay near a stack of old crates. The tunnel at the far end had partially caved in, blocked by frozen earth and broken boards. Near that cave-in, under a filthy blanket, something moved. Caleb froze. The blanket shifted. A woman's voice, raw and cracked, said, "Don't come closer." The flashlight beam found her slowly, not because Caleb wanted drama, but because some part of him understood that sudden light could be another kind of violence. She was crouched with her back against the stone, one arm wrapped around her ribs, the other hand gripping a length of metal pipe. Her hair, dark chestnut beneath dirt and tangles, hung around a narrow face hollowed by exhaustion. Her lips were split. Her skin had the pale, waxen look of someone who had gone too long without warmth. But her eyes were alive, pale blue-gray, sharp with terror, measuring him as if deciding where to strike. Caleb lowered the flashlight slightly. "My name is Caleb," he said. "I own the house now." Her grip tightened on the pipe. "No one owns this house?" That was not the answer he expected. Bishop moved beside him. The woman flinched hard, lifting the pipe. "Easy," Caleb said, more to the dog than to her. Bishop stopped immediately. The woman stared at the German shepherd. Something changed in her face. Not trust, not peace, but recognition of a different kind of danger. Animals did not usually lie for committees. They did not file reports, whisper through courthouse halls, or smile while signing away a person's life. "He yours?" she rasped. "Mostly," Caleb said. "He has opinions about ownership." Bishop sat. The woman blinked, confused by the dignity of it. Caleb took off one glove slowly and set it on the floor, then placed the pry bar beside it. "I'm not here to hurt you." "That's what people say when they need you calm." "True." Caleb crouched, keeping distance between them. "So don't be calm yet. Just breathe." The woman gave a thin, humorless laugh that turned into a cough. She curled forward, pain crossing her face. "How long have you been down here?" Caleb asked. She looked toward the blocked tunnel. "This time?" The answer settled over the cellar heavier than the cold. Caleb heard the meaning in those two words and did not like it. "This time," he repeated. 4 days, maybe 5. The back line collapsed after the thaw, and freeze. I had food." Her eyes flicked to a torn canvas bag near her foot. "Not enough." "You've been using the Knox." "I didn't know who bought it." Her voice weakened, then sharpened again from habit. "Could have been one of them." "One of who?" She stared at him as if that question alone proved he had not lived in Hollow Creek long enough to understand the local weather. "If I tell you, you'll decide whether I sound crazy." "I've heard a lot of crazy that turned out to be command policy." That pulled the smallest reaction from her, almost a laugh, but it died before becoming sound. "What's your name?" Caleb asked. For a moment she looked as if she had forgotten the usefulness of names. Then she said, "Marla Vane." The name did not mean anything to him yet. But Bishop's ears lowered slightly, a softening of posture Caleb had seen before around wounded people, the ones whose pain had no visible bandage. Caleb looked at the blocked tunnel. "You came through there?" Marla nodded. "From where?" "Old pump station, storage lines, shelter passages." She swallowed with difficulty. Greyhaven was part of the old winter emergency route before people decided it was easier to call it haunted. The words sounded too deliberate to be delirium. Caleb could hear training in her speech, a mind still organizing facts, even while her body shook. "You need a doctor," he said. The change was immediate. Marla shoved herself backward against the wall, raising the pipe again. Her face drained of what little color it had. "No." "Marla, no hospital, no clinic, no sheriff." Caleb stayed still. "You're dehydrated, maybe injured. I'm not asking permission to notice that. And I'm not asking permission to stay alive." Her voice cracked, but anger held it upright. "You call them, they'll put me back in the file." "What file?" "The one where they turn a person into symptoms." She pressed the pipe across her chest like a shield. "Stress reaction, paranoid ideation, unreliable witness, non-compliant, every word clean enough to wash blood off hands." Caleb said nothing. He knew enough about systems to know they rarely needed to be dramatic to be cruel. A form could bury a person as surely as earth, if enough people agreed not to dig. Above them, wind moved against the house. Marla's breathing had gone too fast. Her eyes were not seeing the cellar anymore. Caleb recognized that, too. The body returning to a room the mind had escaped badly. Bishop did something then that Caleb would remember long after. The dog rose, not quickly, not with command. He stepped forward only once, then lowered himself to the ground a few feet from Marla. He placed his head on his paws and turned his face slightly away, making his body smaller than it was. A large dog choosing not to be large. Marla stared at him, her fingers loosened on the pipe. Bishop did not wag, did not whine, did not ask anything of her. The cellar became very quiet. Then Marla's face folded, not in surrender, but in exhaustion, too old to keep standing. Her mouth trembled once. A sound escaped her, small and broken, like water finding a crack in ice. Caleb looked away for a second. Some wounds deserved privacy even when they were happening in front of you. "Here's what we're going to do," he said softly. "I'm going upstairs. I'm getting water, blankets, food. You can keep the pipe. Bishop stays where he is unless you want him gone." Marla wiped her face with the heel of her hand, angry at the tears. "Why?" "Because you knocked." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got right now." When Caleb climbed back to the kitchen, the house looked different. The cabinets were still warped. The windows still leaked cold. The fire still snapped in the other room. But Greyhaven no longer felt empty. It felt accused. He filled a cup with water, found a clean blanket from his duffel, opened a can of soup, and cursed the stove until one burner agreed to perform its civic duty. As the soup warmed, he stood with both hands on the counter, looking down at the hatch in the floor. He had bought the house because it was cheap, because it was all he could afford, because the world had taken enough from him that a place nobody wanted felt honest. Now a woman was hiding under his kitchen, and some part of him, the tired, selfish, wounded part, wanted to close the hatch and drive back to the motel where problems cost by the night and did not come with names. Then Bishop gave one soft bark from below. Not alarm. Reminder. Caleb closed his eyes. "Yeah," he whispered. "I heard her." He brought Marla upstairs slowly. She resisted at first, not from pride, but from the animal fear of changing positions when every position had once been used against her. Bishop went ahead, stopping on each third step, as if making sure the path remained patient. Caleb did not touch Marla unless she reached for the railing and nearly fell. Even then, he offered his arm, letting her decide whether to take it. She did. Her hand was cold through his sleeve. In the kitchen light, she looked smaller and more human, which somehow made the whole thing worse. Dirt streaked her cheek. One sleeve of her navy puffer jacket was torn near the shoulder. Her boots were mismatched in the laces, one tied with cord. She stood just inside the kitchen, staring at the room as if it belonged to a world she had been declared unfit to enter. Caleb set the blanket on a chair near the living room fire. "Sit if you want. Stand if that feels safer." She looked at him then, really looked. "You talk like someone who knows the difference." He did not answer. She sat. The first spoonful of soup made her close her eyes. Not with pleasure exactly, but with the shock of warmth. Caleb turned away and busied himself with the fire because watching a starving person remember food felt too intimate. Bishop lay between Marla and the front door. He did not sleep. For the next hour, Caleb asked almost nothing. He learned only fragments, because fragments were all she could give. She had not lived beneath Greyhaven for years. That was town legend wearing a dirty coat. She had moved through abandoned places on the edges of Hollow Creek, sleeping where she could, never staying long. The cellar beneath Greyhaven connected to old passages used decades ago for winter emergencies, back when storms cut roads and people still believed preparation was cheaper than regret. The tunnel had collapsed after a cycle of thaw, rain, and sudden freeze. She had been trapped with 2 bottles of water, 3 protein bars, a dying flashlight, and the hope that whoever now owned the house would not be one of the people who wanted her quiet. "Why not leave Hollow Creek?" Caleb asked once. Marla stared into the fire. "Because they took my name here." He understood that more than he wanted to. Near midnight, Caleb offered her the small downstairs room. She refused the door closed. He left it open. He put a chair nearby for himself, but she shook her head. "Don't guard me." "I wasn't." "You were." "Fair." He moved the chair farther away. Bishop, however, took position in the hallway without consulting either of them. Marla watched him settle down, his body angled so he could see the front door and her room at the same time. "He always do that?" she asked. "Make decisions for everyone?" A faint line appeared at the corner of her mouth. "Yes." "Constantly." It was not a laugh, but it was the first thing in the house that sounded like one. By morning, snow had polished Hollow Creek into postcard beauty again. Caleb left Marla with water, bread, a blanket, and Bishop's stern supervision while he drove into town. She did not like him going. She liked less the idea of him asking questions. But she did not stop him. The diner sat near the center of Main Street, windows fogged from heat, a bell over the door giving a tired jingle when Caleb stepped inside. The smell of coffee, bacon, and fried potatoes wrapped around him. Conversation thinned when people saw him, not stopped. Hollow Creek was too polite for that, but thinned. Behind the counter, Dottie Mercer poured coffee with the authority of a woman who had ruled that stretch of Formica longer than some local officials had been alive. She was short, solid, silver-brown hair pinned up messily, a dish towel thrown over one shoulder like a banner from a very practical kingdom. Her eyes were dark, quick, and unimpressed by nearly everything. "You're the man who bought Greyhaven," she said. "Caleb Rowan." "I didn't ask yet." He sat at the counter. "You were going to." Dottie gave him a look that might have killed a weaker man before breakfast. Then she poured coffee into a mug and set it down. "You eat?" "Sometimes." "Dangerous habit, skipping it." "I'll risk it." She shouted toward the kitchen, "Eggs and toast for the haunted house man." A few locals glanced over. One older man pretended to read a newspaper upside down. Caleb wrapped both hands around the mug. "I need to ask about someone." Dottie's towel stopped moving. He kept his voice low. "Marla Vane." The diner changed. It was subtle, but Caleb felt it. Forks paused. A booth near the window went quiet. The man with the upside-down paper suddenly found the correct orientation very important. Dottie set the coffee pot down. Her face did not soften. It hardened in a sadder direction. "You don't want to throw that name around in here," she said. "I'm not throwing it." "No, you're holding it like a lit match in a room full of old curtains." "Then tell me why the curtains are so dry." For a moment, Caleb thought she might tell him to leave. Instead, Dottie leaned closer. Her voice dropped so low the coffee machine nearly covered it. That woman was not always what people say she became. "What do people say?" Dottie's mouth tightened. "Whatever lets them sleep." Caleb waited. Dottie looked past him toward the snowy street, toward the neat little town with its bakery steam and wreaths still hanging in windows. "Hollow Creek is a sweet place if you know where not to step." "And Marla stepped wrong?" "No." Dottie picked up her towel again, twisting it once between both hands. She pointed down. The words stayed with Caleb on the drive back. At Greyhaven, Marla was standing by the living room window, wrapped in the blanket, looking out at the town below. Bishop sat beside her, close enough to be felt, not close enough to trap. The pale winter sun laid Hollow Creek in gold and white. From here, the town looked gentle, almost holy. Smoke rose from chimneys. The frozen lake shone between pines. Nothing ugly moved on the surface. Caleb stepped inside quietly. Marla did not turn. Did they go quiet? Yes. They always do. Bishop looked up at Caleb, then back to Marla, as if mediating between two damaged species. Marla's reflection in the glass looked ghost-like, but the woman herself was flesh, breath, hunger, fear, and fury barely held together. "People say this house is haunted," Caleb said. Her eyes stayed on the town. "It isn't," she whispered. "Hollow Creek doesn't need ghosts." A long silence passed. Then she added, "It has living people who learned how to pretend they don't hear knocking under the floor." Outside, snow kept falling in the sunlight, bright and clean enough to cover anything. By the second morning, Marla Vane had stopped flinching every time the house settled. Not completely. Fear did not leave a body just because a fire was lit and a bowl of soup had been eaten. It lingered in the shoulders, in the eyes, in the way fingers tightened around a mug when tires passed outside. But she no longer sat with her back pressed to the wall as if the wallpaper might betray her. That was something. Caleb did not call it progress aloud. Progress was a word people used when they wanted pain to hurry up and become useful. Marla sat at the kitchen table, wrapped in a gray wool blanket Dottie Mercer had left on the porch before sunrise, along with a pot of stew and a note that read, "Eat before both of you become ghosts." Dottie had not knocked. Caleb suspected Mercy embarrassed her when performed directly. Bishop lay beneath the table, not quite touching Marla's boots, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. The German shepherd had adopted a position between Caleb and Marla as if the table were a diplomatic border, and he had been appointed ambassador by some ancient kingdom of dogs. Marla watched Caleb pour coffee. "You asked about me," she said. It was not a question. "At the diner," Caleb said. "Then you saw it." "Saw what?" "The town turning into furniture." Caleb leaned against the counter, mug in hand. "They got quiet." "That's what I mean." Her voice was stronger today, though still rough at the edges. The fire in the living room gave the old house a pulse. Morning sun spread across the kitchen boards, pale and clean. If someone had walked in at that moment, they might have seen only a tired man, a hungry woman, and a watchful dog in a worn-down house. They would not have seen the cellar beneath them. They would not have seen the years behind her eyes. Marla reached for the notebook Caleb had found in her canvas bag. It was dark blue, waterproof, warped along the edges, held together by a rubber band. She rested her hand on it for a while before opening it, as if the pages were a wound she had to uncover carefully. "I worked for the county water lab," she said. "Not glamorous. Nobody applauds the woman labeling creek samples in February." "Sounds like steady work." "It was honest work." Her mouth tightened. "Until it wasn't." Caleb sat across from her. Bishop's ears shifted, but his head stayed down. Marla turned the notebook toward Caleb. The pages were filled with tiny, precise handwriting. Dates, locations, temperature readings, well numbers, chemical abbreviations, arrows, cross-references. It did not look like madness. It looked like a mind trying to hold the world together with ink. "I tested residential wells, runoff channels, parts of Hollow Creek, and the old pump station line near North Star," she said. North Star De-icing Solutions. They make and store chemical compounds for highway winter treatment. Anti-icing, de-icing, brine additives. Trucks go in and out all winter. Caleb scanned the notes. "You found something." "After storms." Marla tapped a column with one thin finger. "Not every time. That was part of the problem. The spikes came after heavy snow events, when runoff should have diluted some readings, not made them worse. The worst samples were always near the old drainage system and the pump station." "What kind of spikes?" "Enough to ask questions. Enough to retest. Enough that a responsible office would have notified the state. And instead, the report changed. She said it simply. No drama. That made it worse. Caleb had heard men describe ambushes that way, flatly, as if the voice could survive only by refusing decoration. I thought it was an error at first, Marla continued. Then a second report changed, then a file disappeared. I sent a memo. My supervisor told me not to panic residents over preliminary data. I requested independent testing. She gave a small laugh without humor. That was when everyone became very concerned about my stress levels. Caleb looked up. Marla did not meet his eyes. They held a town meeting, she said. Said it was about public reassurance. They put me at a folding table in front of half the town. Mayor Crane smiled like he was blessing a church picnic. A North Star consultant asked questions so technical they sounded neutral unless you knew they were traps. Then someone brought up my medical leave from years before. What medical leave? My mother died. I took 6 weeks. Apparently grief becomes a diagnosis if the right person needs it. Her thumb pressed into the notebook cover. I raised my voice. Once, maybe twice. Someone filmed 15 seconds. That clip went everywhere by morning. What did it show? Me saying they were poisoning people? Were they? Marla looked at him then. Her eyes were tired, but beneath the fear was something harder than fear. That was what I wanted to prove. Caleb said nothing for a long moment. Outside, Hollow Creek glittered under sun. Snow on the window ledge shone like sugar. Somewhere down the road, a truck engine passed slowly, then faded. The town looked too clean to contain such a thing. But Caleb had learned long ago that clean surfaces were sometimes where rot felt safest. Later that morning, he drove into town with Bishop in the passenger seat and Marla's notebook locked in the glove compartment. Marla had wanted to go. Her body had refused before her pride could argue. Caleb had seen the tremor in her knees when she stood. He did not mention it. Hollow Creek's clinic sat behind the pharmacy, a low brick building with a blue awning and snow piled high along the walkway. Caleb did not go inside immediately. He watched people enter and leave. An old man with a cane, a woman carrying prescriptions, a nurse smoking quickly near the side entrance as if winter had personally offended her. The name on the directory read, Dr. Lenora Hayes. Marla had written it on a scrap of paper and then crossed it out 3 times before giving it to him. Inside, the clinic smelled of antiseptic, wet wool, and old magazines. A receptionist asked if he had an appointment. Caleb said no. Bishop sat by his leg with such solemn calm that the receptionist lowered her voice without realizing it. Dr. Lenora Hayes came out after 15 minutes. She was in her mid-50s, slight and tired-looking, with silver-brown hair cut in a neat bob and narrow glasses that made her eyes appear even paler. She looked at Caleb first, then at Bishop, then at the hallway behind him, as if expecting a ghost to step out from an exam room. "You're the man from Greyhaven," she said. "Caleb Rowan." Her fingers moved to her glasses. She took them off, wiped them with a cloth, then put them back on, though they had not been dirty. "You should make an appointment if you need care." "I'm asking about Marla Vane." The color did not leave her face all at once. It retreated slowly, like water draining from a basin. "I can't discuss patients." "I'm not asking for private details." "You just did." "I'm asking why a water technician became a town warning sign." Lenora looked toward the receptionist. "My office." The room was small, crowded with file cabinets, medical journals, and a framed photograph of a younger Lenora standing beside a man on a snowy trail. Her desk was too organized to be peaceful. She closed the door. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "The truth." Her laugh was so small it was almost a cough. "People say that as if it's a clean instrument." Caleb waited. Lenora sat behind her desk but did not lean back. Marla came to me after the meeting. She was exhausted, frightened, not sleeping. She believed people were changing reports and watching her. She looked down at her hands. I wrote that she was experiencing prolonged stress and possible paranoid ideation under professional pressure. Was she paranoid? Lenora closed her eyes. Caleb did not press. When she opened them, they were wet, but steady enough. I wrote soft words, she said. That is how cowardice survives in respectable places. Soft words, ambiguous words, words that can be used later by harder people. Caleb felt something shift inside him, not forgiveness for her, not yet, but recognition. Guilt had a posture. Lenora wore it like an old coat she could not remove in public. Who pressured you? She shook her head. Not directly, never directly. A call from the county office, a reminder about liability, a note that North Star's legal counsel had concerns about employee instability affecting public confidence. Mayor Crane visited the clinic fundraiser 2 days later and thanked us for keeping Hollow Creek calm. Calm, Caleb repeated. Lenora's mouth twisted. Then she opened a drawer and removed a sealed envelope. Her hand trembled as she slid it across the desk. What's this? My personal note from that week, not the chart note, the one I should have written officially. Her fingers remained on the envelope for a second before letting go. It says Marla's fear was consistent with workplace retaliation, not delusion. It says I recommended independent review of the water reports. Why keep it? Because I was a coward, not a monster. That sentence stayed between them. When Caleb left the clinic, he did not feel victorious. He felt heavier. Some truths did not arrive like keys. They arrived like stones handed to a man already carrying too many. Bishop nudged his thigh once before climbing into the truck. Yeah, Caleb said quietly. She knows. The dog looked out the windshield toward Main Street. She knows, and she let it happen. Bishop gave no answer. Dogs were merciful that way. They did not confuse explanation with absolution. Rita Sloane's office occupied the second floor above the pharmacy. Caleb could have waited. He did not. The bell on her door gave a bright, nervous jingle when he entered. Rita looked up from her desk and immediately stood, knocking a pen to the floor. Oh, Mr. Rowan. Bishop entered behind him, inspected the office carpet, and found it morally questionable. I need to ask about Grace Alden, Caleb said. Rita's expression tightened around the name. The office was warm, too warm, with framed photographs of lake cabins and smiling families on the walls. Rita herself looked polished in a camel blazer over a cream turtleneck, but the polish stopped at her eyes. Those eyes had not slept well. I handled a sale, she said carefully. That's all. Greyhaven. Her hand moved toward the leather folder on her desk and stopped. Caleb noticed. Grace Alden owned the house before the county sale? Rita looked toward the window. Below, Main Street shone under noon light. People moved along the sidewalks with grocery bags and coffee cups, small figures inside a snow globe that someone kept shaking gently. Grace was placed under temporary financial guardianship, Rita said. The property was sold to cover care expenses. Was she unable to make decisions? That's what the assessment said. Did you meet her? Rita did not answer. Bishop walked forward, picked up the pen she had dropped, and placed it at her feet. Rita looked down at the dog. The absurd courtesy of it broke something small in her face. She knew my name, Rita whispered, when I brought the papers. She asked why the winter shelter map had been removed from the pantry wall. She asked if the pump station line was still marked. Rita pressed a hand to her mouth for a second, then lowered it. That doesn't sound like a woman who didn't understand her own house, does it? No. I told myself it wasn't my place. People seem to tell themselves that a lot here. Rita flinched, but she did not deny it. She opened the leather folder and removed a set of copied documents. The guardianship company was called North County Care Administration, on paper, independent. But the attorney who filed the emergency petition also represented a contractor tied to North Star. Caleb took the pages. The sale price was low, Rita said. Too low. I questioned it once. My broker told me old houses with reputations don't get market value. And the reputation? Rita's eyes lifted. The knocking stories got louder after Grace was moved. The office seemed to shrink around that sentence. Not haunted, Caleb thought. Marketed as haunted. A cheap curse placed carefully over valuable silence. Back at Greyhaven, the afternoon light slanted gold across the kitchen. Marla sat with Dottie at the table, though with might have been generous. Marla occupied one end, pale and guarded. Dottie occupied the other like a general unwilling to admit she had brought reinforcements in the form of biscuits. "I said eat," Dottie told Marla as Caleb entered. "Not stare at it until it confesses." Marla looked up. "Food doesn't confess. In this town, you take what you can get." Caleb set Lenora's envelope and Rita's documents on the table. Marla stared at them. Her hand moved toward the envelope, then stopped. Bishop lay down between her chair and Caleb's, his body forming a warm bridge beneath the table. Not guarding now, connecting. Marla opened Lenora's note first. Caleb watched her read. No explosion came. No tears. Her face remained still in the terrible way of someone who had imagined vindication so many times that the real thing felt almost unreal. "She knew," Marla said. "Yes." Marla folded the paper with careful hands. "I wanted to hate her forever." "You still can." That earned him a glance. Caleb shrugged. "Doesn't expire." Dottie snorted despite herself. "Well, there's your inspirational speech." For the first time, a small, bitter smile touched Marla's face. It vanished quickly, but it had existed. Then Caleb showed her Grace's documents. Marla leaned closer. The room changed as she read, her exhaustion burning away under concentration. The frightened woman from the cellar receded. In her place sat someone who knew maps, signatures, reports, systems, the hidden plumbing of corruption. Grace knew the tunnels, Marla said. She kept a hand-drawn map in the pantry. She told me once Greyhaven used to be a winter emergency house. Before my time. Before the town decided memory was inconvenient. She reported her well? One of the first. Marla's finger moved down the page. Then she fell on ice, got taken to a hospital outside town, and suddenly someone decided she couldn't manage her affairs. Dottie's face had gone dark. Grace Alden made the best blackberry jam in 3 counties. That woman could manage an army if given enough jars. Marla looked toward the window. Outside, snow fell again, softer now, turning the yard blue-white in the fading light. "I hid a bag," she said. Caleb waited. "At the old pump station, copies of my original sample sheets, a map Grace gave me, a flash drive with lab export files." Her voice was quieter now. "I thought if I kept it away from town records, they couldn't change it." "When?" "Before I disappeared." Dottie's hand tightened around her coffee mug. She did not ask disappeared where. Not yet. Marla looked at Caleb. "I need it. You're not strong enough to go anywhere." "I didn't say I could get it alone." The room went still. Caleb felt the shape of the request before she finished forming it. He looked down at the papers on the table, at Lenora's confession, at Rita's copied records, at Marla's thin hands gripping the edge of the chair as if she could hold herself inside the world by force. He thought of lawyers, signatures, assets moved in secret. He thought of polite people using clean language to make theft look like procedure. He had come to Hollow Creek to stop fighting other people's wars. He could say no. A man was allowed to be tired. That night, he almost did. After Dottie left and Marla retreated to the downstairs room, Caleb stood at the kitchen sink, staring into darkness beyond the glass. His reflection looked back at him. Hard jaw, silver at the temples, eyes too old for the face around them. He had survived by knowing when to leave. Leave the burning vehicle. Leave the exposed position. Leave the marriage once the truth had become a locked door. Leaving had kept him alive. Then tires rolled slowly past the house, not fast, not lost, slow enough to be curious, slow enough to count windows. In the hallway, Marla cried out in her sleep. It was not loud. That made it worse. Bishop was on his feet before Caleb moved. The German shepherd crossed to the front door and stood there, silent, body squared to the dark, amber eyes fixed through the wood. No growl, no drama, only certainty. Caleb went to the window in time to see taillights fading down the road. Behind him, Marla stood in the doorway wrapped in Dottie's blanket, one hand pressed against the frame to steady herself. Her face was white. "They used to do that," she whispered, before people started saying, "I was making things up." Caleb looked at the empty road. Something inside him settled, not peacefully, but into place. He could leave. Yes, he could also become one more man who heard knocking beneath the floor and decided the rug looked better where it was. "Tomorrow," he said. Marla's eyes moved to him. "We look at the pump station tomorrow, not alone, not stupid. We do it right." For a moment, she looked as if she did not know where to put relief. Then she nodded once. Bishop remained at the door long after the road went quiet. Before dawn, Marla gave Caleb the list. It was written on folded paper gone soft from being handled too often. Names, addresses, dates, symptoms, wells, notes in the margins, Grace Alden, Dottie's brother, Samuel Mercer, Warren Pike's wife, Elise. Others Caleb did not know yet. Men and women who had reported strange smells in water after storms, skin rashes that would not explain themselves, illnesses that arrived like bad weather and stayed. Caleb sat at the kitchen table while the first gray light crept over the snow outside. Hollow Creek lay below the hill, peaceful and bright, smoke rising from chimneys, the lake shining like a promise. But the paper in his hand changed the view. The town no longer looked like a postcard. It looked like a well covered with fresh snow. And somewhere beneath the clear surface, something had begun to rot. The pump station looked harmless in daylight. That was the first thing Caleb hated about it. The old brick building sat below the north ridge, where the pine woods sloped toward the frozen creek. Snow softened every edge of it. Ice hung from the roof in clear teeth. A red metal sign, nearly buried under frost, still read, "Hollow Creek Municipal Pump Service," though the paint had peeled so badly the words seemed to be losing their memory. Morning sun scattered across the snow, bright enough to make the world look innocent. Marla stood beside Caleb's truck with her hood up and both hands buried in the pockets of Dottie's borrowed coat. She had insisted on coming. Caleb had argued. She had listened to him with the flat patience of a woman who had survived worse than male caution. "If I collapse," she had said, "you can say you were right." That's not as rewarding as people think. It is for men. Bishop had sneezed once, which Caleb chose not to interpret as agreement. Now the German shepherd stood before the station's rusted side door, body angled toward the wind, black and gold coat rippling under the olive harness. He sniffed once along the lower seam of the door and stopped. Caleb saw it. The dog did not pull back. He did not growl, but the line of his spine changed, tighter, lower. A soldier reading the ground before the ambush opened its mouth. "What?" Caleb asked. Bishop looked toward the door, then back at Caleb. Marla swallowed. "He smells it." "Smells what?" She did not answer right away. The wind carried the faint scent toward him then, thin but wrong beneath the cold. Chemical bitterness, old mud, something sharp enough to make the back of his throat tense. Marla's face tightened. "That?" Caleb cut the old chain with bolt cutters from his truck. The links fell into the snow with a dull clatter. He pushed the door open. The pump station exhaled. Inside, the air was colder than outside because it had not moved in years. Caleb's flashlight swept over cracked tile, rusted pipes, a control panel with missing switches, old warning labels curling at the corners. Sunlight entered through high, dirty windows and narrow bars, turning dust into slow-falling ash. Marla stepped in after him and went still. For a moment, she was not a woman in borrowed clothes standing in an abandoned pump station. She was somewhere else, some year before this one, some version of herself who still wore an ID badge and believed numbers could protect people if written clearly enough. Bishop moved close to her leg. She looked down at him, then breathed. "Basement access is this way," she said. The stairs were concrete, slick at the edges. Caleb went first. Bishop followed. Marla came last, one hand trailing along the wall. At the bottom, the station opened into a maintenance chamber with a low ceiling and thick pipes running like sleeping iron beasts into the walls. Beyond the chamber, a narrow tunnel disappeared into darkness. Caleb angled the flashlight down the passage. "Greyhaven connects to this?" "It used to." Marla's voice had changed. Here, among pipes and cold stone, fear had to share space with competence. The old emergency network ran between the pump station, a few cellars, the road maintenance shed, and Greyhaven. In heavy storms, if Northridge Road was blocked, people could still move between shelter points. Caleb looked back toward the tunnel. So the haunted house was a rescue route. Before people found better uses for fear. They entered the passage. The ceiling was low enough that Caleb had to duck in places. Ice filmed parts of the stone. Old wiring hung from brackets overhead. Their footsteps echoed strangely, as if the tunnel were repeating them to someone farther below. Marla counted turns softly under her breath. Left at the pressure valve. 12 steps, old brick seam, then the notch. Caleb listened without interrupting. This was the first time he had seen her become something other than hunted. Her shoulders still held tension, but her eyes were sharper now. She knew this place, not as a victim knows a cage, but as a cartographer knows a dangerous coast. Her hand skimmed the wall, reading old repairs and mineral stains. She paused at a place where newer mortar interrupted the old brickwork. "There," she said. Caleb aimed the flashlight. A narrow gap sat behind a loose section of brick near knee-height. It would have been invisible to anyone not looking for it. Marla crouched and reached in. Her hand moved once, then again. Her breath stopped. Caleb already knew before she spoke. "It's gone," she whispered. The tunnel became too quiet. Marla reached deeper, scraping her knuckles against brick. "No, no, no, no." Caleb crouched beside her. "What was in it?" "My originals," her voice thinned. "The sample sheets, Grace's tunnel map, lab exports, chain of custody notes. I sealed everything in a dry bag. It was here." She pulled her arm out. Her hand was empty except for dust and a smear of black mud. For a moment, she simply stared at the gap. Then she laughed once. It was a small sound. Dry, almost polite, worse than crying. Caleb had heard men make that sound when the last radio battery died. Marla pressed her palm against the wall as if she could keep herself from falling through it. "Of course," she said. "Of course they found it. Why wouldn't they? Why would I get one clean thing?" Caleb did not say it might still be somewhere else. Hope offered too quickly could feel like mockery. Bishop moved past them and lowered his nose to the floor near the wall. He sniffed slowly, following a line of scent Caleb could not see. Then the dog nudged something under the edge of a rusted pipe. Caleb reached down and picked it up. A small metal button, dull silver, stamped with a simple angular star inside a circle. Marla's eyes fixed on it. "North Star," she said. Beside the button lay a torn scrap of dark fabric, stiff with frozen mud. Caleb rubbed it between gloved fingers. "Work uniform cloth. Heavy, industrial." "Someone came recently," he said. Marla looked at the empty gap again. The little strength she had gathered on the way here seemed to drain through the floor. "Then I'm back to being a story." "No," Caleb said. The word came sharper than he intended. She looked at him. He forced his voice lower. "You're not a story. You're a witness?" A witness without evidence is just a woman people already learned not to hear. The tunnel held that sentence like a verdict. Caleb could have argued. Instead, he put the button and fabric into a small evidence bag from his truck kit. Not official, not enough, but better than a pocket full of mud. Then Bishop lifted his head. This time he did make a sound, not a growl. A soft, low whine aimed toward the old pump room beyond the tunnel bend. Marla frowned. "What is it?" Caleb turned off his flashlight for 1 second. Darkness folded over them. In it, he heard what Bishop had heard. Breathing. Weak, uneven, human. The pump room beyond the bend was larger than the first chamber, half sunk into the earth, with an old turbine housing in the center and collapsed shelving along the back wall. Caleb moved slowly, flashlight low. "Hello?" he called. A shape shifted behind the turbine. Bishop stepped ahead, then stopped when Caleb gave a low click of his tongue. "Come out where I can see your hands," Caleb said. A man's voice answered from the shadows, rough and broken. "Can't." Marla went rigid. Caleb swept the beam left. The man lay half-curled beside the turbine base, one leg trapped under a fallen metal shelf. He was big-framed but reduced by cold, wearing a brown work jacket crusted with ice and a faded orange knit cap. His beard was gray and uneven, his face red from windburn and pain. One hand clutched a dented metal cigarette case against his chest as though it were a relic. Marla whispered, "Warren." The man's eyes opened. They were gray-brown and bloodshot. When he saw her, something passed across his face that looked too heavy to be relief. "Marla?" he rasped. God. She did not move toward him. Caleb did. He checked the shelf, the leg, the man's breathing. No visible major bleeding. Likely bruising, maybe a fracture. Hypothermia beginning, but not beyond reach. "You know him?" Caleb asked. Marla's voice hardened. "I knew who he used to be." The man swallowed. "I deserve that." "You deserve more than that." "I know." Caleb looked between them. "Name?" "Warren Pike," the man said. "Used to work maintenance at North Star." Marla laughed again, but this one had teeth. "Used to help me pull samples, too, until he disappeared when I needed someone to confirm them." Warren closed his eyes. "They had my wife's treatment tied up in company insurance. I thought if I signed what they wanted, if I kept my head down, I could keep her care going." "And did you?" His mouth trembled once. "No." Marla looked away. Caleb worked the shelf loose enough to free Warren's leg. The man groaned, but did not cry out. Bishop stood close, watching him with grave suspicion. "Why are you here?" Caleb asked. Warren gave a weak nod toward the tunnel. "Same reason you are. Heard she was alive. Heard someone bought Greyhaven. Figured if Marla came back, she'd come for the bag." "You took it?" "No." He coughed, then winced. "Came to see if it was still there. It was gone before me. Crowley's people, most likely." "Evan Crowley?" Marla asked. Warren opened his eyes. The fear in them was answer enough. Caleb pulled a thermal blanket from his pack and wrapped it around Warren's shoulders. "Talk." Warren's laugh scraped like gravel. "That's what I came to do before the shelf decided justice needed help." He looked at Marla, not Caleb. "North Star didn't just leak," he said. "Leaks are accidents. This was scheduled." Marla went very still. Warren continued, words slow but gathering force, as if confession had waited years to breathe. "Winter storm nights, roads closed, inspectors delayed. Old drainage line open from the service yard. Waste brine, solvent mix, rinse water from storage tanks. Not every week. Not enough to be easy. Enough to save disposal costs. Enough to poison the places nobody rich had. Wells." Caleb felt the pump room narrow around them. "Crowley ordered it?" he asked. "Crowley ran operations. Nothing moved without him knowing. Hollis knew enough." "Mayor Crane?" Warren nodded. "He didn't want details. Men like that don't ask for details. They ask if it's handled." Marla's voice was low. "He told everyone I was unstable." "He told himself you were dangerous," Warren said. "There's a difference. Maybe not to you, But it mattered to him. Hollow Creek was broke before North Star expanded. People were leaving, storefronts empty, roads bad. North Star paid for plows, heat grants, adult job training, festival lights. Hollis believed one scandal would kill the town. "And Elise?" Marla said. Warren flinched at his wife's name. The cigarette case in his hand clicked softly as his fingers tightened around it. "Elise drank from our well for 23 years, he said. "I don't know what killed her. That's the honest answer. But I know what I signed. And I know I didn't ask enough questions until the house got quiet." No one spoke. Even Bishop seemed to understand that the room had become a confessional, and not the clean kind with candles and polished wood. This was the older sort: stone, rust, cold, and a man finally too tired to keep his sins warm. Marla stepped closer to Warren. For a moment, Caleb thought she might strike him. Instead, she crouched just out of his reach. "You watch them bury me," she said. Warren's eyes filled, but the tears did not fall. "Yes." "You let them make me crazy." "Yes." "You don't get to fix that with one speech in a basement." "I know." "Good." She stood. Caleb saw then that Marla had changed again. The loss of the bag had nearly broken her. Warren's confession did not heal that, but it gave the break an edge, not proof enough, but direction. They got Warren out slowly. It took time, rope, curses, and Bishop's repeated attempts to supervise human incompetence with visible disappointment. Warren could hobble with support, though every step carved pain into his face. Caleb considered taking him to a hospital outside Hollow Creek. Warren refused the local clinic before Caleb even asked. "Not here," he said. "Not yet." Marla did not defend him, but she did not object when Caleb loaded him into the back seat beside a stack of blankets. On the drive back to Greyhaven, the bright winter day had turned white and wind-blown. Snow crossed the road in long, low veils. The world beyond the windshield faded in and out: pine trunks, ditches, fence posts, the pale shoulder of the frozen creek. Warren spoke from the back seat, voice weak. "There are copies," he said. Marla turned sharply. "Where?" "Old storage annex near the North Star service yard. Paper invoices, disposal manifests, some real, some fake. I kept duplicates when Elise got sick." "Why not give them to someone?" Warren looked down at the cigarette case in his hand. "Because cowardice is easier to maintain than people think. You only have to choose it every morning." Caleb watched the road. He thought of his own leaving, his own choice to walk away from lawyers, from the house, from the wreckage of a marriage. That had not been cowardice. He knew that, mostly. Still, there was a difference between leaving a trap and leaving a person beneath the floor. At Greyhaven, Rita Sloane was waiting on the porch with a folder under one arm and snow gathering in her hair. She looked alarmed when Caleb opened the back door and helped Warren out. "Oh, Lord," she said. "Is that Warren Pike?" "Unfortunately," Warren muttered. Rita's eyes moved to Marla. "I found more on North County Care Administration. Grace's guardianship petition was filed by the same attorney who handled 2 North Star land option disputes." Marla looked at the folder, then at Warren, then at Caleb. The house received them all with creaking floors and a fire that needed feeding. By evening, Greyhaven's kitchen had become something between a war room and a bad church basement meeting. Papers lay across the table: Lenora's note, Rita's records, Marla's remaining notebook pages, Warren's hand-drawn sketch of the North Star storage annex. Dottie arrived uninvited with soup and a loaf of bread, took one look at Warren and said, "Well, if guilt had a smell, I'd open a window." Warren lowered his eyes. "Evening, Dottie." "Don't evening me. Eat." He obeyed. Bishop lay under the table with the solemn authority of a judge who had seen too much but appreciated soup. At one point, Dottie glanced down at him and frowned. "That dog looks at me like he knows I underreported cash tips in 1998. Caleb nearly smiled. Marla did. It was brief, but real enough for the room to feel less doomed. The evidence was not enough yet. That became clear as they sorted it. Lenora could show Marla had been discredited unfairly. Rita could show Grace's house sale stank of legal manipulation. Warren could testify that North Star scheduled illegal disposal, but testimony from a guilty man would be attacked. Marla's notebook gave patterns, not final proof. The missing bag left a hole big enough for lawyers to drive through. They needed more. Warren tapped the sketch of the North Star Annex. Invoices are there if Crowley hasn't cleaned it out, but you don't walk in on a Tuesday afternoon. There's a routine. Winter Festival Week, night of the main event, security shifts thin. Trucks move because nobody watches roads while they're drinking cider under string lights. Rita looked pale. That's in 3 days. Caleb said nothing. Marla did not look at him this time. She looked at the table. That mattered. She was no longer begging him to believe her. She was studying the battlefield. Later, after Dottie left and Rita drove back to town, Caleb photographed the documents under the kitchen light. He did not trust one copy of anything anymore. His old life had taught him that paper disappeared when powerful people found fire. He packaged the scans, notes, photos of the North Star button, and a short message to the contact Dottie had given him, a Portland investigative reporter named Talia Brooks. Dottie had described Talia as a woman who can smell polished lies through 3 locked doors and a church bulletin. Caleb sent the file. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered without speaking. A woman's voice came through, calm but alert. This is Talia Brooks. I received your files. Caleb looked toward the kitchen table. Marla sat there with Bishop's head resting near her boot. Warren slept badly in the chair by the stove, wrapped in 2 blankets and his own disgrace. What do you think? Caleb asked. There was a pause, not uncertainty, calculation. If these are real, Talia said, you're not investigating a haunted house. Caleb looked toward the dark window, where Greyhaven's reflection floated over the snow like a lantern above buried ground. Talia's voice sharpened. You're touching a town built on poisoned water. Mayor Hollis Crane came to Greyhaven House carrying apple pie. That was the first insult, not the visit. Caleb had expected a visit eventually. Men like Hollis did not send wolves before they sent smiles. They preferred to knock politely, bring something warm, admire the porch, and count the exits while pretending to discuss weather. But the pie bothered Caleb. It was wrapped in brown paper, tied with red string, still warm enough to steam faintly in the cold air. Beside it, Hollis carried a paper bag from the bakery in town, the kind printed with a cheerful blue snowflake and the words, Hollow Creek Bakes together. A threat, Caleb thought, should at least have the decency to smell less like cinnamon. Hollis Crane stood on the porch in a navy wool coat cut perfectly to his frame, a gray cashmere scarf tucked at his throat, black leather gloves clean despite the slush on the steps. He was in his mid-50s, handsome in the public service way, square face softened by practice, hair brown-gray and neatly combed, smile warm enough for campaign posters, but never careless enough to become real. On his lapel gleamed a silver snowflake pin. Bishop stood between him and the door. The German shepherd did not bark. He only looked at Hollis with amber eyes so steady they seemed almost rude. Hollis lowered his gaze to the dog and smiled. "And this must be Bishop," he said. "Frank Teague told me he has better manners than half the zoning board." Caleb kept one hand on the doorframe. "Depends on the half." Hollis chuckled as if Caleb had given him a gift. Men like Hollis laughed easily. It made other people feel they had not just been measured. "I'm Hollis Crane, mayor, though I try not to let the title ruin my personality." He lifted the pie slightly. "Welcome offering. We don't like newcomers thinking Hollow Creek has forgotten its manners. Most towns send a fruit basket. We're a pie people." Behind Caleb, the house was too quiet. Marla was in the back room. Warren sat by the kitchen stove with his injured leg propped on a chair, looking like a man waiting for punishment to pick the correct door. The documents were hidden upstairs beneath a loose floorboard Caleb had repaired the night before. Rita had taken copies into town. Talia had instructed them not to move too quickly. "Do not spook the machine until we know which gears are connected," she had said over the phone. Hollis Crane was a gear with a smile. Caleb stepped onto the porch instead of inviting him in. Bishop shifted with him, keeping his body angled between the mayor and the threshold. Hollis noticed. Of course he noticed. "I heard you've done good work on the place," Hollis said, looking past Caleb toward the siding, the porch rail, the smoke rising from the chimney. "Greyhaven has needed a steady hand for a long time. Old houses don't fix themselves." "No, they don't." Hollis's eyes moved over the yard, the pines, the truck. "Neither do old reputations." The wind lifted snow from the porch rail and scattered it between them. Caleb said nothing. Hollis set the pie on the small table beside the door, slowly, almost ceremonially. "I'll be direct, Mr. Rowan. Hollow Creek is a peaceful town. Not perfect. No place with winters this long gets to be perfect. But peaceful. Peaceful places don't usually need to say it out loud." Another mild laugh. "You've had a difficult year, from what I understand." Caleb's jaw tightened before he could stop it. That was the second insult. Hollis saw the reaction and softened his face into something like sympathy. "Divorce is a brutal thing. I've seen good men lose their sense of direction after less. Add military service, relocation, isolation." He let the sentence fade, as if he were too kind to finish it. Bishop's ears went forward. Caleb felt an old coldness settle behind his ribs. "You research all your welcome visits?" "I try to understand people before trouble misunderstands them." "There trouble here?" Hollis looked toward the window of the back room. It was barely a glance. Too quick to be accidental. "There are people who know how to appeal to a decent man's rescue instincts," he said. "Marla Vane, for example, has been unwell for a long time. Warren Pike has a history of alcohol, guilt, and unreliable claims. Grace Alden was placed in care through proper channels. Sad stories, all of them. But sadness doesn't always equal conspiracy." Caleb looked at him for a long moment. The mayor's voice stayed gentle. That was his weapon. He wrapped accusation in concern until it looked like a blanket. "And North Star?" Caleb asked. Hollis's smile thinned only a fraction. "North Star kept this town alive when mills closed and young people left. They pay wages, fund plows, keep the winter heat assistance program from collapsing. There are families here who made it through January because that company wrote checks faster than the state did." "That's not an answer." "It's the answer elected officials have to live with." Hollis stepped back from the table, leaving the pie like a small altar. "A good soldier knows every fight has a cost. A good leader knows some costs are paid quietly so others don't pay everything." Caleb's hand closed around the doorframe. Hollis looked at him with grave kindness. "One soldier to another kind of servant, Mr. Rowan. Know when the war is over." "I'm not in a war." "No?" Hollis's eyes flicked to Bishop again. The dog had not moved. "Then don't let wounded people convince you to build one in your living room." For the first time, Caleb smiled. It was not friendly. "Mayor, if you came to warn me, use fewer baked goods next time." Hollis laughed again, but the warmth had cooled. "Enjoy the pie." He walked down the steps carefully, polished shoes finding clean places in dirty snow. At the bottom, he turned once and looked up at Greyhaven House. Not at Caleb, at the house. Then he got into his dark SUV and drove away. Caleb watched until the taillights vanished behind the pines. Only then did Bishop step forward and sniff the pie. He sneezed. "Agreed," Caleb said, and left it outside for the crows. By noon the next day, Hollow Creek had begun to change around him. Not loudly. A town did not need torches to warn a man he was unwelcome. It had smaller tools, Frank Teague suddenly did not need help unloading plywood. The widow with the split fence postponed repairs until spring, though the fence leaned like it was considering surrender by sunset. At the gas station, two men stopped talking when Caleb walked in, then resumed with the kind of casualness only amateurs thought convincing. Someone had told the postman Bishop had lunged at him. The postman himself, a narrow man named Ellis, looked horrified when Caleb asked. "He did no such thing," Ellis said. "Dog sat down and judged my boots. That's all." Town version grew teeth. Town versions usually do. At the diner, Dottie slammed a plate of eggs in front of Caleb hard enough to make the fork jump. "You eat," she said. "I ordered coffee." "I improved the order." Across the room, two women at a booth looked toward him, then away. One whispered, not quietly enough. "Greyhaven. Woman in the cellar. Poor man isn't right after the divorce." Caleb set his jaw. Dottie heard it too. Her eyes narrowed, but Caleb shook his head once. "No? I wasn't going to throw anything. You reached for a biscuit." "A biscuit is not a felony. It is if you throw like you cook." For a moment, Dottie's mouth twitched. Then the humor faded. She leaned closer. "They're starting early." "Who?" "The people who want everyone unsure what they saw before they see it." She poured coffee, though his mug was full. "Hollis has always been good at making fear sound like civic duty." Caleb looked toward the window. Main Street glittered outside, under fresh snow. The bakery lights glowed. A wreath hung on Town Hall. The whole place looked like it belonged on a Christmas card sent by someone with clean hands. "Why didn't you say anything before?" he asked. Dottie stopped pouring. That question did not anger her. It hurt her. She set the pot down carefully. After closing, she followed him to Greyhaven. She arrived with a heavy stew pot, a paper bag of bread, and a manila envelope tucked under one arm. Warren looked up from the stove when she entered, and then immediately looked down, which was possibly the wisest thing he had done in years. Marla sat at the table, her blue notebook open. She stiffened at the sight of the envelope. Dottie noticed. "For once, not bad news," she said. Then she grimaced. "Well, not new bad news." She put the envelope on the table. Inside were medical bills, handwritten notes, old photographs, and a folded obituary for Samuel Mercer, beloved brother, stubborn fisherman, terrible singer, according to the clipping. In the photo, Samuel stood outside the diner in a red wool hat, grinning with one arm around Dottie's shoulders. He had her eyes, but softer. Dottie did not sit right away. "My brother's well ran off the Lower Creek line," she said. "He complained about the taste after storms. Metallic, he said. Bitter. I told him pipes get old." Her mouth pressed flat. "He got sick 2 years later. Liver, kidneys, things doctors named like naming them, made it less cruel." Marla looked at the papers. Dottie's voice roughened. "I thought about bringing it up, but North Star workers ate at my place. Their families, festival catering, winter contracts. You know what a small-town diner runs on? Not courage. Coffee, debt, and pretending politics don't sit in the booths." No one interrupted. "I knew something was wrong," Dottie said. "Not enough to prove. Enough to shame me." Marla's face had changed, not softened exactly. But her anger had made room for the shape of Dottie's grief. "I'm sorry," Marla said. Dottie barked a laugh that broke at the end. "Don't you dare apologize to me. I was one of the people who let them make you small enough to ignore." That stayed in the kitchen. Bishop rose from under the table, crossed to Dottie, and sat at her feet. Dottie looked down at him. "No, don't you start forgiving me with your heroic eyebrows." Bishop placed his head against her knee. The old woman's face collapsed inward for 1 second. She put her rough hand on his head and looked away. "I hate this dog," she muttered. Caleb glanced at Marla. For the first time since the pump station, Marla was not looking at documents or doors. She was watching Dottie touch Bishop as if the room had become something more dangerous than a war room. It had become a place where guilt could sit down and not immediately be excused. That evening, Dr. Lenora Hayes came to Greyhaven. She knocked softly, as if hoping no one would answer, and she could still claim she had tried. Snow dusted her dark coat. Her silver-brown hair was tucked under a knit hat, and her glasses fogged the moment she stepped inside. Marla was in the living room by the fire. Lenora saw her and stopped. No one moved for several seconds. Then Lenora took off her gloves. "I brought copies," she said. "My personal notes, a timeline of the county calls, the name of the legal contact who asked whether your mental state could affect public confidence." Marla did not stand. "Did you write that I was paranoid?" she asked. Lenora's face tightened. "I wrote words that let them say it." "Why?" Lenora looked down at the folder in her hands. "Because I was afraid they would ruin me, too." Marla's voice was flat. "And did they?" "No." "Then I suppose your plan worked." The words struck cleanly. Lenora accepted them without defense. Caleb watched from near the kitchen doorway. It would have been easy to step in, to soften the room, to rescue everyone from discomfort. He did not. Some moments did not need a man with broad shoulders pretending pain could be rearranged like furniture. Lenora placed the folder on the coffee table. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. "I am asking to be useful before my silence becomes the only thing I leave behind." Marla looked at the folder for a long time. Then she reached for it. Not for Lenora's sake, for the truth. After Lenora left, Caleb spoke with Talia Brooks on the phone while standing on the back porch. The night was clear, the stars cold and sharp over the pines. Inside, voices moved softly through Greyhaven, broken by the occasional scrape of a chair. Talia did not waste time. "You have fragments," she said. "Good fragments, but fragments can be crushed. Warren is compromised. Marla was publicly discredited. Lenora's notes help, but they'll say hindsight. Rita's records suggest motive and pattern, not disposal. So what do you need? Original documents if possible. Chain of custody material. A current video of illegal discharge would matter. Independent sample collection would matter more. And I need a safe line to the State Environmental Office before anything goes live." Caleb rubbed a hand over his jaw. "You're telling me not to move fast." "I'm telling you the truth doesn't win because it's true. It wins when it's harder to kill than the lie." He looked toward the pump station road, invisible beyond the trees. "Warren says there's a routine during Winter Festival." "I know. Dottie told me." Talia paused. "Do not play hero in the woods." "I don't play." "That makes you exactly the kind of man who thinks he's exempt from the warning." He almost smiled. "You always this encouraging?" "Only when people sound useful and reckless." After the call, Caleb did not go back inside right away. The old urge to leave had returned. It came quietly, not like panic, not like fear, more like a door opening somewhere in him. He could pack before dawn, put Bishop in the truck, drive until Hollow Creek became another name behind him. Marla had Dottie now, Lenora, Rita, Talia. Maybe that was enough. Maybe he had already done more than a man owed strangers. Inside the house, Warren coughed. Marla said something Caleb could not hear. Dottie answered with what sounded like an insult disguised as nutrition advice. The house felt warmer than it had any right to feel. That was what frightened him. He stepped off the porch and walked toward the pines. Bishop followed without being called. They moved through snow, bright under moonlight, past the dead grass, past the leaning fence, into the edge of the woods where the world became blue and silver. Caleb walked until his breath grew harder and the house lights were half hidden behind trunks. Then he stopped. "I don't know how to do this," he said. Bishop stood ahead of him on the trail, looking back. "I know how to clear a room. I know how to leave. I know how to keep moving when everything behind me is burning." Caleb's voice dropped. "I don't know how to stand still with people who might need me." The dog waited. "That's what scares me," Caleb said. "Not Hollis, not North Star, me. I trusted the wrong person once, and she took the floor out from under my life. Now every time someone reaches for help, part of me looks for the knife." Bishop came back through the snow and pressed his shoulder against Caleb's leg. Not dramatic, not enough to fix anything, enough to keep him from walking farther. Caleb looked down at him. "You're annoyingly confident." Bishop wagged once. "One step at a time, is that it?" The dog turned and walked ahead, then stopped and looked back again. Caleb let out a breath that almost became a laugh. "Fine." They returned to Greyhaven. By morning, the plan had become a list taped to the kitchen wall. Not a heroic plan, a practical one. Rita would pull the final guardianship filings and trace the attorney connections. Lenora would prepare a sworn statement and identify the county contacts who pressured the clinic. Dottie would quietly speak with families who had medical bills, strange well complaints, or memories they had buried under politeness. Marla would mark likely discharge points and reconstruct the missing sample chain from her surviving notebook. Warren would map the North Star storage annex and the truck schedule during Winter Festival week. Caleb would handle field observation only if Talia had a secure upload channel ready. Bishop, according to Dottie, would continue looking disappointed in all of us until morale improves. Near noon, Warren tapped the calendar with a thick, trembling finger. "Festival's tomorrow night," he said. "Main event at the square. Hollis gives his little speech. Most of town will be there pretending Coco is a personality. North Star runs low staff. That's when trucks move, if they're moving." Marla looked at the map. Talia's voice came through Caleb's phone on speaker. "No public release until I confirm receipt. No confrontation unless unavoidable. If you get footage, upload immediately. If you get samples, seal and label them on camera. And Caleb?" "Yes?" "Bring the dog, but don't make the dog your plan." Bishop raised his head at the mention of himself. Dottie folded her arms. "Too late. He's been the best plan in this house since day one." No one argued. That evening, Caleb stood alone on Greyhaven's porch. Below the ridge, Hollow Creek glowed in preparation for the Winter Festival. Strings of lights shone across Main Street. The town square glittered faintly through the trees. Smoke rose from chimneys. The lake beyond reflected the last bruised colors of sunset. Once, Greyhaven had looked like the end of the road, a cheap place, a cursed place, a place where a tired man could disappear without anyone asking too many questions. Now its windows burned gold behind him. Inside were people with folders, scars, soup, lies half confessed, and truths not yet strong enough to stand in daylight. The house no longer felt like a grave. It felt like a fort built by the wounded before the storm. Bishop came to the porch and sat beside him. Caleb looked down at the old dog, then back at the bright town below. "Tomorrow," he said softly. The snow kept falling, gentle and clean, over the roof of the haunted house that had started gathering the living. Hollow Creek looked most beautiful on the night it began to tell the truth. Snow fell lightly over the town square, not in a storm, but in a soft, theatrical drift, the kind that made children in postcards look upward with wonder and adults forget how cold their hands were. Strings of golden lights hung between lampposts and bare maple branches. The ice sculptures outside Town Hall caught the glow and threw it back in broken pieces. A carved pine tree, a fox, a little frozen bridge over a frozen creek. The whole place smelled of cocoa, fried dough, pine smoke, and cinnamon. It was almost enough to make Caleb Rowan understand why people had chosen silence. Almost. He stood at the edge of the square with Bishop at his left knee, the German shepherd's black and gold coat dusted white along the shoulders. Caleb wore his dark slate parka over the olive combat shirt, boots planted in the snow, eyes moving from the stage to the side streets to the alley beside Town Hall. He was not looking for ghosts. He was looking for patterns. On the temporary stage, Mayor Hollis Crane stood beneath a banner that read, Hollow Creek Winter Light Festival. His silver snowflake pin gleamed on his navy coat. He held a microphone in one gloved hand and smiled at the crowd like a man born under flattering light. Every winter, Hollis said, his voice warm and practiced, this town proves what it has always known, that we survive together. Through storms, frozen roads, hard years, and hard choices, Hollow Creek remains strong because we trust each other. People applauded. Some meant it. That made it worse. Caleb looked across the square. Dottie Mercer stood behind the chili booth in a red scarf and brown apron, ruling 3 steaming pots like a queen of battlefield soup. A town council clerk in a puffy blue coat hovered near her, trapped by Dottie's passionate lecture on whether beans belonged in chili. They do not, Dottie declared loud enough to start a civic crisis. And if you disagree, you may explain yourself to God and my ladle. The clerk, who clearly wanted to be anywhere else, remained exactly where Dottie needed him. Near the pharmacy, Rita Sloane slipped through the side entrance of the temporary records office, her camel coat blending with the festival crowd. She carried no folder tonight. Too obvious. The flash drive Talia had sent was hidden inside a lipstick tube in her purse. Dr. Lenora Hayes stood near the clinic booth, hands folded around a paper cup of tea. She looked pale but steady. Her signed statement had already been scanned and sent to Talia. Caleb saw her check her phone, then look toward the road leading out of town. Marla was not in the square. Not yet. She and Warren Pike had gone to the North Star Storage Annex 2 miles beyond the festival lights. Warren knew which door stuck, which camera had been dead for months, which old cabinet still held paper because men like Evan Crowley trusted digital systems less than they pretended. Talia's last instruction had been simple. No grandstanding. No public accusations until evidence is secure. Then she had added, and if anything feels wrong, leave. Documents matter, but living witnesses matter more. Caleb had not answered quickly enough. Talia had noticed. Rowan, she had said. That was not a decorative sentence. Now, as Hollis spoke about trust, Caleb's phone vibrated once. A message from Talia. Read a file received. Lenora statement received. Waiting on field video and annex records. Caleb typed back with one thumb. Moving. He looked down at Bishop. Time. The dog rose. They left the square by the north alley, unnoticed by most, and avoided by those who had begun to notice too much. Beyond Main Street, the festival music thinned. The golden lights faded behind them. Caleb and Bishop moved along the service road toward the tree line, keeping off the plowed center where footprints would show clearly. Snow reflected the moonlight, turning the pines silver and blue. Bishop found the scent before Caleb saw the truck. The dog lowered his head near a ditch and paused, nostrils working. Chemical sharpness rode under the cold, mixed with diesel and black mud. He looked back once, then moved forward. Caleb followed. The path bent behind North Star's fenced service yard, where the snow had been disturbed by heavy tires. A tanker truck sat near an old drainage access road with its lights off. 2 men worked beside it, their bodies half hidden by shadows and pine trunks. One held a flashlight low, the other crouched near a circular service cover in the ground. Caleb eased behind a frozen berm and raised his phone. The camera focused slowly. He recorded the truck's side number, the hose uncoiling, the gloved hands opening the ground cover, the dark liquid pulsing through a thick line into the old drainage system beneath Hollow Creek. Not rumor, not memory, not a woman's voice cut into 15 seconds and mocked across a town. This was the thing itself. Caleb uploaded the clip to Talia's secure link while still recording another angle. His hand stayed steady, but something in his chest moved like a door opening under pressure. Bishop's body stiffened. Caleb stopped. A flashlight beam swept across the snow behind them. "Hey!" No time to be clever. Caleb slipped the phone into his chest pocket and moved. Bishop went first, not running blind, but choosing the low path between pines. Behind them, boots punched through snow. A man cursed. Another shouted into a radio. Caleb did not look back. The woods narrowed near the creek bed, where snow covered uneven ground and thin ice hid beneath powder. Bishop veered suddenly, cutting left. Caleb followed without question, but his boot broke through a crust of ice at the edge of a shallow wash. For one sharp second, his balance went. Bishop lunged back, caught Caleb's sleeve in his teeth, and pulled sideways hard enough to tear fabric. Caleb hit solid snow instead of the dark gap beyond the ice shelf. "Good call," Caleb breathed. Bishop released him and sneezed, offended that humans required so much maintenance. Behind them, one of the men crashed through brush. Bishop turned, not attacking, not biting. He charged low across the man's path, a flash of black and gold through falling snow. The man stumbled backward, lost his footing, and sat down hard in a drift with a shout that was more embarrassment than injury. Caleb kept moving. His phone vibrated again. "Talia, video received, upload complete. Get out." Then a call came through. "Marla?" Caleb answered while crouched behind a fallen pine. Her voice was breathless. "Caleb, the annex door locked behind us. Warren's trying to wedge it. Someone's outside." "How many?" "One, maybe two. We got the records, paper invoices, disposal sheets, old transport logs." "Caleb," her voice caught, not in panic, but anger. "They knew which cabinet." "Where are you?" "East Annex, storage room, back wall. Warren says there's an old loading hatch, but it's rusted shut." Caleb looked toward the service yard lights through the trees. The smart choice was to leave. He had the video. Talia had it. The first article could go live without the annex records. If he went back, he risked the evidence, Bishop himself. For one heartbeat, he saw his old life in a courtroom folder. Paper saved, person abandoned. Strategy clean, heart ruined. He closed his eyes once. No, not again. "I'm coming," he said. Talia would have cursed him beautifully if she had been on the line. Bishop was already facing the annex. "Of course you are," Caleb muttered, or furry prophet of bad decisions. They moved through the trees toward the low storage building beyond the North Star yard. The annex was a squat metal structure half buried in snow, with one loading door facing the road and a smaller service hatch near the back. Warren was at that hatch when Caleb arrived, shoulder braced against rusted metal from the inside. His injured leg had to be screaming, but he held the gap open 3 inches with a length of pipe. "About time," Warren grunted through the crack. "You complain a lot for a rescue." "Guilt gave me standards." Caleb wedged the pry bar into the seam and pulled. Bishop pushed beside him, not understanding leverage, but contributing moral force. The hatch screamed open 6 inches, then a foot. Marla crawled out first, clutching a waterproof folder under her coat. Her face was scraped, hair loose around her cheeks, eyes burning. Caleb reached for her arm and pulled her into the snow. Warren came next with less grace and more profanity. Behind them, the inner door rattled. "Go," Caleb said. A man appeared at the corner of the annex, flashlight raised. Bishop stepped into the open and stood still. That was all. The man stopped. There were smarter things than challenging a German shepherd in moonlight, especially one who looked like he had reviewed your soul and found paperwork missing. Caleb, Marla, and Warren slipped into the pines. They reached the edge of town as the first phones began to glow. At the festival, Hollis Crane was still speaking. "And we must be careful," he said from the stage, "not to let outsiders, rumors, or fear divide the community we have worked so hard to protect." A murmur moved through the crowd. One phone lit up near the cocoa booth, then another, then 5 more. Screens reflected in faces. Talia Brooks had published the first report. Not a wild accusation, not a dramatic headline with teeth too sharp to be believed. A careful article from a Portland independent paper, built like a bridge no one could kick down easily. Scanned medical notes, property records, photographs of the North Star button, Warren's preliminary statement, Rita's documents, Lenora's signed timeline, Caleb's video of the tanker discharge, and a note that state environmental officials had received the material. The festival music faltered. Dottie abandoned the chili booth and walked into the square, carrying Samuel Mercer's medical bills in both hands. Rita emerged from near Town Hall, face pale but lifted. Lenora stepped forward slowly, as if each footfall cost her years of hiding. Then Marla entered the square. She did not stride like a hero. She walked like someone crossing ice she had fallen through before. Caleb came beside her. Bishop stayed on her other side. Warren limped behind them, clutching the folder from the annex against his chest. Hollis saw them. For the first time since Caleb had met him, the mayor's smile arrived late. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hollis said into the microphone, voice still smooth but thinner now, "please remember that online material can be misleading. We are dealing with claims from individuals who have suffered deeply, and while we sympathize—" Marla stopped below the stage. She did not shout. That was what made people listen. "My name is Marla Vane," she said. Her voice was not amplified, but the crowd had gone quiet enough to carry it. 7 years ago, I tested water samples from the Lower Creek line, the pump station runoff, and 6 residential wells after a February storm. The results were changed before they reached the state office. Hollis stepped toward the stairs. "Marla, this is not the place." "It was never the place," she said. "That was how you kept winning." The words landed harder than anger. Warren stepped beside her, face gray under the lights. "I signed false transport sheets for North Star," he said. "I knew waste was being moved through the old drainage line. I kept copies. I kept them too late." Dottie lifted Samuel's folder. "My brother complained about the water for 2 years before he died. I told him pipes get old because that was easier than admitting I was scared." From the crowd, a woman began to cry. A man near the cider stand said, "My well, too." Someone else whispered, "The rash after the big storm." Another voice, "They told us it was minerals." Not everyone spoke. Some stared at their phones. Some looked at Hollis as if waiting for him to repair the old story. Some looked angry, not at North Star yet, not at Hollis, but at the sudden burden of knowing. Truth was not a sunrise. It was a weight placed into people's hands. At the edge of the square, a North Star pickup tried to pull away from behind Town Hall. Caleb saw Evan Crowley behind the wheel. He was large, broad-shouldered, black industrial jacket zipped high, face set in hard lines under the windshield glare. Beside him on the passenger seat sat a banker's box, papers spilling from the top. Deputy cars had not arrived yet, but Frank Teague had. The hardware store owner stepped his plow truck sideways across the alley exit with the slow satisfaction of a man finally finding the perfect use for bad parking. The pickup braked hard. Dottie looked over and said, "Frank, you beautiful, inconvenient ox." Evan slammed the truck into reverse. A second vehicle blocked him from behind. Rita's old Subaru, crooked, unimpressive, and perfectly placed. Sirens sounded in the distance then, not local at first, but state units from the highway, called by Talia's contact before the article went live. Hollis stood on the stage under golden lights, microphone hanging at his side. For years he had known how to speak for Hollow Creek. He had known which words to use: unity, survival, jobs, trust, winter, family. He had built a warm room out of language and invited everyone inside. Now the walls had windows. And outside them the water was dark. Marla stood in the falling snow with Bishop beside her. The dog sat close, his coat turning white along the back, his notched ear lifted toward the crowd. He looked less like a weapon than a guardian at an old gate, one who had finally brought a lost soul back to her own name. Caleb watched the people of Hollow Creek look at Marla, some with shame, some with fear, some, at last, with recognition. The silence did not vanish. It cracked. And through the crack, the first honest light came in. Justice did not arrive in Hollow Creek like thunder. It came like thaw, slowly, coldly, without music. It moved under the snow where no one could see it at first, loosening what had been frozen for years. A pipe here, a sealed file there, a signed statement, a water sample, a name spoken aloud by someone who had once lowered their voice. North Star's service yard was partially shut down within a week. State environmental officers came first, followed by federal investigators with hard cases, clean boots, and faces that made small-town officials suddenly remember appointments elsewhere. The old drainage lines were marked, fenced, tested. Men in reflective jackets drilled through ice and soil while reporters stood at the edge of town with cameras pointed at places Hollow Creek had driven past for years without looking. Evan Crowley was charged first, not for everything people whispered he had done, but for the things paper could already hold: obstruction, destruction of records, intimidation of witnesses, illegal disposal violations under active investigation. It sounded too small for what had happened. Caleb understood that. Law often began by naming the corner of a monster it could prove existed. Mayor Hollis Crane did not go to prison that week. He did not confess under golden lights. He did not fall to his knees in the snow and give the town the clean ending it wanted. He stepped down temporarily while the investigation continued. Some people still defended him. At the diner, Caleb heard them over coffee. He kept this town alive. He made hard choices. North Star paid for half the winter programs. Dottie Mercer slammed a pot lid so hard 3 customers sat straighter. "Funny," she said. "Poison always sounds practical when somebody else drinks it." No one argued with Dottie when she held kitchen metal. Caleb did not become beloved. That surprised no one, least of all him. Some people thanked him with awkward nods, envelopes of cash he did not ask for, or firewood left on Greyhaven's porch before dawn. Others crossed the street when they saw him. A few looked at him with a resentment too tired to hide, not because they thought he had lied, but because he had made denial expensive. Hollow Creek had been beautiful when it did not have to be honest. Now beauty had questions under it. Greyhaven House changed too, though not all at once. Dottie came so often with soup, stew, biscuits, and opinions that Caleb accused her of occupying the kitchen under culinary martial law. "I liberated it," she said, stirring a pot large enough to drown a lesser man. "Your canned chili was a crime scene." Rita Sloane spent evenings at the dining table, sorting property records and guardianship papers. She had stopped dressing like she expected a client to appear at any moment. Her camel coats remained, but the careful polish had loosened around her. Sometimes she sat with her hair pulled back, sleeves rolled, reading old signatures with the grim focus of someone excavating her own excuses. Dr. Lenora Hayes worked with independent health specialists to build a list of households needing water testing and medical review. She came to Greyhaven quietly, always knocking twice and waiting, as if every entrance now required humility. Talia Brooks kept writing from Portland. She did not turn Caleb into a hero or Marla into a saint. Caleb respected her for that. Her articles were precise, unsentimental, and impossible for Hollow Creek to dismiss as gossip. She wrote about records, systems, delayed complaints, altered reports, and how a town could be both victim and accomplice. Marla read every piece, sometimes twice. She did not smile when her name appeared correctly, but she stopped looking away. In late March, they found Grace Alden. Rita located the care facility in New Hampshire through an old billing trail. It sat on a hill overlooking a valley of bare trees, the building clean and quiet in the way places became when designed to calm families rather than residents. Caleb drove Marla and Rita there in the pickup. Bishop rode in the back seat, solemn as a judge traveling to hear ancient testimony. Grace Alden was smaller than Caleb expected. She sat by a window with a pale lavender cardigan around her shoulders and a thin chain at her neck. Her hair was white and pinned low, her hands folded in her lap, fingers bent by age, but not useless. When she looked up, her eyes were cloudy at the edges, yet something bright remained behind them. Rita knelt beside her chair. "Mrs. Alden," she said softly. My name is Rita Sloane. Grace studied her. You had the brown folder. Rita's face trembled. Yes? You were frightened, Grace said, not accusing, merely remembering. Rita lowered her eyes. I was. Marla took out a photograph of Greyhaven House, an older one found among county attachments, showing the porch freshly painted, smoke rising from the chimney, a line of footprints across deep snow. Grace reached for it. Her hand shook until it touched the image. Then her fingers steadied. People came when the road closed, she whispered. Truckers, linemen, once a nurse who walked 2 miles in a storm because her car died by the creek. Her thumb rested on the porch in the photograph. We kept water hot, blankets in the cellar, a lantern in the kitchen window. Marla's eyes filled, but she did not interrupt. They called it Greyhaven because the old pines made the snow look gray at dusk, Grace said. Not because it was sad. People forget names and then blame the house. Caleb looked away toward the window. For months Greyhaven had been called cursed, haunted, dangerous. Yet in Grace's memory it had been a lighthouse made of wood, soup, and stubbornness. Grace looked at Marla then. You are the water girl, she said. Marla swallowed. I tried to warn them. I know. Grace touched the key hanging from her neck. The house heard you. No one spoke for a while after that. Grace did not cry loudly. She only held the photograph and let tears slide down her face as if they had waited politely for years and finally been given permission. On the ride home, Marla sat in the passenger seat with both hands folded around the copy of Grace's statement. Bishop rested his muzzle between the front seats, close to her elbow. She remembered, Marla said. Caleb kept his eyes on the road. Yes? They told everyone she couldn't. Yes? Marla looked out at the melting snow along the roadside. I hate that being believed feels like coming back from the dead. Caleb understood more than he wanted to. Spring came badly to Hollow Creek. It did not burst into flowers. It seeped in mud. Snowbanks shrank into gray ridges. The frozen creek split open with dark seams. Roofs dripped. Yards revealed every lost glove, broken branch, and ugly thing winter had hidden out of courtesy. Marla began working with the independent testing team from Greyhaven's dining room. Maps covered one wall. Sample kits filled shelves Caleb built from scrap lumber. Wells were marked with colored pins. Tested, pending, unsafe, needs retest. Her blue waterproof notebook sat at the center of it all, no longer a relic of exile, but a working tool again. She still had bad nights. Some evenings, if a truck slowed outside, she went very still. She did not like closed doors. Caleb noticed that when she used the downstairs room, she left the door open 2 inches, even when she slept. Bishop noticed too. He began lying outside her door, not blocking it, not guarding like a prison, just present. A quiet promise with pause. One night, Marla stood in the hall, looking down at him. You don't have to sit there, she told the dog. Bishop thumped his tail once. He knows, Caleb said from the kitchen. Marla looked over. Knows what? That people say that when they need him to stay. She did not answer, but the next night she placed an old folded blanket near the door before going to bed. For Bishop, she claimed. No one argued. Caleb had his own ghosts to sort through. The letter from his ex-wife arrived in April, forwarded twice before finding Greyhaven. The envelope looked too clean in his hand. Her handwriting still had the same elegant loops. Once he had loved that handwriting. It had appeared on grocery lists, birthday cards, sticky notes left on coffee mugs. Now it looked like a costume a knife had learned to wear. He opened it by the stove while rain ticked against the windows. She wrote that she had followed the news. She wrote that she was sorry for how things ended. She wrote that she had been scared too, that Caleb had become distant after service, that the marriage had been lonely, that she hoped one day they could both understand the harm they had caused each other. Each sentence was careful. Not false exactly. That was the worst of it. There was enough truth in some of the words to make the lie stand straighter. Caleb read the letter once, then again. Bishop sat beside him, watching with the grave concern of an old priest who had taken a vow of fur. Caleb folded the paper. There was a time when that letter would have torn him open, not because it begged forgiveness, but because it tried to share the blade. It invited him to carry half the guilt for a trap someone else had built. He opened the stove door. The fire was low but alive. He placed the letter inside. For a moment the paper resisted. Then one edge browned, curled, and caught. Her handwriting blackened into unreadable lines. Caleb did not feel healed. Healing was too clean a word. He felt lighter by the weight of one envelope. Bishop looked from the stove to Caleb, then gave a slow blink that somehow managed to say, "Finally?" "Don't look so proud," Caleb muttered. Bishop wagged once. By early May, Greyhaven's cellar had been cleared. The old hatch beneath the kitchen no longer hid a terrified woman under a rug. Caleb repaired the hinges, sanded the frame, and installed a proper latch. Dottie scrubbed the shelves with such violence that dust from the previous century fled in disgrace. Rita labeled storage bins. Lenora stocked first aid kits. Marla taped a waterproof map of tested wells to the stone wall. The cellar became an emergency storehouse. Bottled water, blankets, batteries, flashlights, portable chargers, medical kits, sample containers, a laminated list of safe wells and boiling instructions, extra dog food because Dottie insisted Bishop was staff and staff deserved supplies. Caleb built a sign for the porch from a board salvaged from the old fence. He painted the letters himself. Warm water, dry floor, no questions first. Dottie read it and sniffed. Sentimental. You hate it? I didn't say that. You're crying. I have onion exposure. There are no onions. There are spiritual onions. The first late spring snowstorm came when everyone had started trusting mud. It began as rain, then turned to sleet, then became heavy wet snow that dragged branches low and made the roads shine black beneath the slush. By evening, power flickered in half the valley. The town's emergency alerts warned against travel on Northridge Road. Greyhaven's windows glowed. Inside, the fire burned steady. Marla sorted sample forms at the dining table. Rita argued with Talia on speakerphone about whether a scanned document was legible enough. Dottie stirred soup in the kitchen and accused everyone of trying to starve professionally. Lenora labeled medical supplies with a precision that suggested guilt could be converted into office organization if given enough stickers. Bishop lay near the hearth, eyes half closed, accepting the worship of warmth. Then came a knock at the door, not from beneath the floor, from outside. Caleb looked up. For one strange second, the room held still, as if the house itself remembered another knock, another night, another hand reaching through fear. He opened the door. A man stood on the porch, maybe in his late 40s, soaked through, shivering hard. His jacket was too thin for the weather, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, lips pale from cold. Down the road, hazard lights blinked faintly through the snow. "My car died," the man said. His voice shook with embarrassment as much as cold. "I saw the sign. I don't have money for a tow tonight. I can keep walking if this is private." Caleb looked at him. For a moment, he saw himself months earlier. Not the same face, not the same story, but the same edge. A man standing before a house he did not know how to ask for help from. A man expecting the world to charge admission for mercy. Bishop stepped onto the porch. The stranger froze. The German shepherd sniffed his boot, his hand, the wet cuff of his jacket. Then Bishop stepped aside. Permission granted. Caleb opened the door wider. "Come in first," he said. "We'll figure out the rest after." The man's face changed. Not joy, not relief exactly. Something smaller and more sacred. The moment a person realizes the door is truly open. Behind Caleb, Dottie shouted, If he drips on my clean floor, he gets soup anyway, but I'll complain loudly. Marla rose to add wood to the fire. Rita cleared a chair. Lenora reached for a dry blanket. Bishop escorted the stranger inside with solemn dignity, as if this had always been his real work, not chasing men through snow, not finding hidden rooms, but deciding who needed to be brought in from the cold. Caleb closed the door against the storm. Outside, snow thickened over the porch, the pines, the road, the town that was still learning how to tell the truth. Inside, Greyhaven breathed. It was still old, still crooked in places. The upstairs window rattled when the wind came hard from the east. One kitchen cabinet refused to close unless kicked in exactly the right mood. The floorboards complained under every boot, as though the house intended to remain opinionated until the end of days. But it was no longer a place for hiding. Caleb had not bought Greyhaven to save anyone. He had bought it because he had only enough money left for a house nobody wanted, in a town that preferred its monsters imaginary. He had come there with a broken trust, a scarred dog, and a heart locked so tightly even grief had to knock politely. Then something under the floor had answered. Now the cellar held water instead of fear. The kitchen held soup instead of silence. The porch light stayed on through the storm. Bishop settled near the hearth among people the world had once pushed to the margins. Marla stood by the fire, no longer a ghost beneath the boards. Dottie muttered over the soup like an old prophet with a ladle. Caleb looked at them all and felt no grand miracle descend. Only warmth, only breath, only a door that had opened and stayed open. Greyhaven was not a haunted house anymore. It was where the knocks beneath the floor were finally heard. Sometimes the most haunted places are not filled with ghosts, but with truths no one wanted to hear. Greyhaven House reminds us that healing does not always begin with a grand miracle. Sometimes it begins with one knock, one open door, one loyal soul refusing to walk away. In our own lives, we may meet people who are carrying pain beneath the floorboards of a quiet smile. We may not be able to fix everything, but we can listen, we can believe, and we can leave a little warmth where the world has grown cold. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us about a time someone opened a door for you when you needed it most. And if you want more stories of loyalty, courage, and second chances, please subscribe and join us for the next one. May God give you peace in the places that still ache, courage to speak the truth, and grace to keep a light on for someone who is still finding their way home.